I already talked about the original Star Wars trilogy and why it's so awesome, but now I want to talk about the special editions and the prequel trilogy eventually. Lots of people don't like this modern era of Star Wars. And there's a really interesting documentary out there called The People versus George Lucas, which shows how serious people get when they talk about these movies, and they do raise some good points. But I wanted to throw my own opinions out there and tell whether I agree or disagree with many of the criticisms against these movies. So first of all, the special editions. Now I'm talking about the versions of the original trilogy that were re-released in theaters in 1997. For most people, this was the first chance to ever see these movies on the big screen. All we had at that time was our VHS tapes and maybe Laserdiscs. This was a big deal just to see these movies in theaters. So the changes seemed to me to be more like a bonus item, to make the price of admission more worth it, to come out to the theater to see a movie that you may already own. I thought it was cool to see a movie that you've seen 1,000 times in a new way. So I didn't mind the changes at first. So to me, it didn't become a problem until we realized that George Lucas had no intentions of ever releasing the original movies again. He considered these to be the definitive versions, and that's when I started to realize we're stuck with these changes. This was like rewriting history. There would be no way to show the originals to your kids and say, this is how they were when they first came out. There would be no way to go back and point to the exact versions that made a cultural impact. Now, to clarify, there's been changes to these movies ever since they were released. Most famously, the title Episode 4 being added to New Hope. But most of these changes were very minor. The special editions were the first time major changes were made, and since then, they've continued to be changed with every home video release. Even the prequel trilogy has been changed. In Phantom Menace, Yoda was originally a puppet, but on the Blu-ray, he's CG. So these movies have been changed all the time. Even if you track down the oldest VHS or beta tape of the original Star Wars, it's not going to be exactly the way it was in theaters in 1977. The only way to really be a purist is to somehow get an original 35mm print. But still, the special editions were a significant change. And yes, it bothered me that these changes were here to stay and to be changed more and more. That made the older releases more elusive. They eventually did take the same versions that were on the Laserdiscs and release them on DVD, but they didn't update the image and sound quality for the standards of the time, and they were non-anamorphic, so unless you were watching on an old square TV, the picture would be letterboxed and pillarboxed. Although strangely, they spliced on the original title crawl, the one that did not say Episode 4. I think that might have been the first time that was ever seen on home video of any kind. Another thing is that the unaltered versions were included as bonus discs to go along with the current versions, so you had to buy the special editions basically in order to get the old ones. Since then, there's been many unofficial edits where fans have taken it upon themselves to reconstruct the older versions. I think since people wanted them so badly, it would have made a lot of financial sense to just sell them that way. They could sell the new versions, but it would have been nice to have the old versions as an option. That's what they did with the Star Trek Blu-rays for the original TV show. They added some digital makeovers. The starships are CG and the Gorn blinks, but they give you the option to watch it with the enhanced features or without. That's what they should have done for Star Wars. As for some of the specific changes, to be honest, I don't think all of them are bad. My favorite is A New Hope, the Jabba scene. This was not an afterthought. This was something they actually filmed originally. It actually gives important plot information that was never there before. It shows that Han owes money to Jabba, and this sets up the events for the next films. Sure, they mention that he owes money, in the dialogue, and you don't really need to see the scene to understand what's going on, but having it there helps support the rest of the story. The only issue was that they had to digitally add Jabba, since the character they originally filmed was nothing like the Jabba that we would come to know. Sure, I prefer practical effects, but this was a unique situation where that was the only way to do it, They didn't really have the option. I think they did a pretty good job considering that Han walks behind Jabba and they had to make it so that it looked like Han was walking over his tail. And with recent additions, they've updated the texture on Jabba, so it's been improving. I thought it was very creative to go back to an old scene and finish it. Not to mention, seeing footage of young Harrison Ford playing Han Solo was a real treat. This is a change that I choose to keep. Also, I liked many of the changes in Empire Strikes Back. Actually seeing the Wampa creature was a nice addition. I always felt keeping it off screen was a bit of a tease. Refilming Ian McDiarmid to portray the Emperor, that was a welcome change. Fixing up the backgrounds to Cloud City instead of those plain white walls, that was pretty good too. As for the changes that I didn't like, most of them are in Return of the Jedi. I think that's the film that suffered the most, by far. First of all, there's the band that performs in Jabba's palace. They changed the song. The original song, which has a name, Lapti Nek, is always cemented in my mind. It's so weird and catchy. That's such a memorable little part of the movie that they took out. Not only did they change the song, they replaced the puppets with CG, and they perform to the camera. They break the fourth wall. That's not the only song they changed. They changed the unforgettable Ewok celebration song, Yub Nub. Sure, the new John Williams score is great, but how could you scrap two iconic songs? To me, that's the biggest disservice that was ever done to Star Wars. Ever. But the one that seems to be the biggest point of discussion all the time is in New Hope. Strangely, it's a moment that only lasts a fraction of a second. Yep, we're talking about Greedo shot first. In comparison to all the rest, it's not my biggest complaint, but it seems to be the one that gets all the attention. I agree with everyone, but it wasn't the moment that stuck out to me personally. Anyway, George Lucas had his reasoning for wanting Greedo to shoot first, so it doesn't make Han into a cold-blooded killer. But what it comes down to, the scene is a tribute to the classic westerns. It's all about who's the quickest to pull the trigger. In those movies, it's a matter of survival. In The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Tuco says it best. If you want to shoot, don't talk, shoot. In the 2004 DVD version, it was changed again. This time they both shoot at almost the same time, but still it's Greedo who shoots first. So I agree with everyone. And as for the saying, Han shot first, there's even discussion about that. There's people who say, no, he didn't shoot first. He was the only one who did shoot, so how could he be first? Well, then can we call it Han preemptively shot before Greedo had the opportunity to shoot? Like, what is up with this scene? I find it hilarious that this has caused so much discussion. Anyway, the special edition changes are not all bad. It's kind of a mix. If it were up to me, I'd keep some of the changes, but discard lots of the rest. It would be nice if we all had the chance to customize our own Star Wars movies. Want to keep Jabba, but don't want Greedo to shoot first? Imagine that, an interactive Blu-ray edition where you get a menu where you can check all the things you want, then sit back and enjoy your customized version of a classic saga. I don't think there's any other film where you can say that. George Lucas said films are never finished, they're abandoned. It's hard for a lot of people who don't make movies to understand why that's a hard thing, to give up something that you worked on and hold back what it is that you really want to do. So I can understand George Lucas a lot here. They were his movies, but also people really loved them the way they were. So if anything, the aversion to all these changes is only more proof of how awesome these movies are.